So guys, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I got a good one for you. Today we're reviewing TYR's VALKYRIE SPEEDWORKS. Now you may remember I did just post a review of the TYR VALKYRIE Elite. This is TYR's carbon plated race day shoe, and the VALKYRIE SPEEDWORKS is their training option. It's their partner to the VALKYRIE Elite Carbon. So how does this stack up? I think you guys are going to be surprised. Let's get into it. Okay, let's get those disclosures out of the way. TYR was good enough to send me this pair of the VALKYRIE SPEEDWORKS for the purpose of review. However, they haven't told me what to say. They don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. But that said, you can pick up a pair of the TYR VALKYRIE SPEEDWORKS for $170. And of course, I will place a link in the show notes below in case you want to pick up a pair for yourself. And look, $170 is not cheap. But I gotta say, it is right in line with the competition, and you are getting a lot for that $170. Let's go over some specs. The TYR VALKYRIE SPEEDWORKS has 39.5 in the heel, 33.5 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. Now that's an identical stack to the VALKYRIE Elite Carbon. TYR claims that in a US men's size 9, the SPEEDWORKS tips the scale at 8.1 ounces or 230 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 13, it tips the scale at 10.1 ounces or 286 grams. So it's a pretty light shoe, and I think you'll see why in just a second, even though we do have a big stack of midsole. But let's get started at the top and work our way down. I'm going to hold that up so you can see the heel collar. We've got a good amount of padding around this heel collar. They haven't done away with that in order to save weight. They're obviously saving weight in other places, but we do have a lot of padding around this heel collar. The heel counter is totally rigid. In fact, you can see this overlay coming around the heel, and you can feel the rigidness coming right around your heel. Because of that, or I assume because of that, I did have a good heel lockdown in the SPEEDWORKS. TYR is using an ultra lightweight, that's what they say, an ultra lightweight upper, and they call it their Alpha Weave upper. And look, can you see this? I'm going to have to put some overlays on the screen so you can just see how thin and how aerated this upper is. Like on a cold day, your feet are going to be getting cold in the SPEEDWORKS. And my friends, that's a good thing. And just by looking at the shoe, this is where I think TYR is really saving a lot of weight. Now, just quickly about overlays, we already mentioned these kind of polyurethane overlays coming around the side and the back with the branding there. Got this overlay coming around the toe box, and then we've got an overlay coming along the eyelet chain, which it gets quite translucent right here. And I'm just noticing now that it actually says Alpha Weave right on this eyelet overlay. Now there is an underlay coming right along the top of the midsole foam. That's just to give that upper a little more structure. Let me just show you the profile of the shoe, and yes, you can see this because of this colorway. The Alpha Weave upper is so light that you can actually see the gusset right here on the side. So the tongue is gusseted. We also have this lace loop right here in the middle, and the tongue has a good amount of padding. Now we have a very smooth bit on the tongue, again kind of covered in polyurethane, which is holding that padding in place. So when you cinch down the laces, you're not going to get any lace bite with this tongue. There's enough padding there to protect your foot. Then when we come down just a little, the rest of the tongue is very aerated, and the gussets on both sides are also extremely aerated. The VALKYRIE SPEEDWORKS is made to breathe, and needless to say, I didn't experience any overheating when I was running in this shoe. We do also have that extra eyelet in case you needed to do the runner's knot, but for me that wasn't something that I had to do with this shoe. Now TYR does claim that we have an anatomical toe box. Now we're not talking anatomical toe box as the likes of Topo or Ultra, but it is more anatomically shaped than other brands that have similar shoes. Now on the website, TYR does say that the SPEEDWORKS comes with locking laces. Now perhaps when they say locking laces, they say something other than what I think of when I hear locking laces. You know, when I hear locking laces, I think of those serrated laces that when you tie them, they kind of lock together so they don't come untied. To be clear, the SPEEDWORKS does not have those kind of laces. We have a relatively standard linguine shaped lace. There's a little bit of stretch, and overall I found them to be very sufficient. And I say sufficient, like I had no issues with them whatsoever. My SPEEDWORKS never came untied when I was running with them. However, on a race shoe, I like that extra security of actually having those locking laces. But totally not required in a training shoe like this. However, I may as well tell you right now that I think the VALKYRIE SPEEDWORKS is a great option for an inexpensive race day shoe also. So if you didn't want a carbon plated shoe or it wasn't in your budget, I think the SPEEDWORKS is definitely one to take a look at. And that's because, let's come down to the midsole. TYR is using their Launch PX midsole foam. That's a beaded PEBA foam, and we have 2 layers of it, and then sandwiched in between these layers is a nylon plate. Now I'm a big fan of this beaded PEBA midsole, and this beaded PEBA foam is the same type of foam that is used in the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, which I should say is a definite competitor to the VALKYRIE SPEEDWORKS. But I think we're going to make an entire comparison video between those two shoes. So we've got 100% PEBA foam, nylon plate in between. We come down to the outsole. We have a good amount of outsole rubber, definitely a lot up here on the forefoot. Then we have the strategic strips here in the back, have a nice cutout in the middle where we can view the nylon plate, and TYR's slogan, always in front, emblazoned right on that plate. And if I hold it up, just by looking at it, you can see it's a beaded PEBA foam just by all the dirt is in the crack of the beads, and that happens on every beaded PEBA foam shoe that I have. I don't think there's any getting around it. Luckily, this shoe is still looking pretty fresh after all my training miles that I've put in it. Now, speaking of looking fresh, I think TYR has done a very good job with aesthetics of this shoe. I love this white on white colorway. Now, you can also buy this shoe with a black upper and white midsole, and you can buy it with these overlays around the toe box and around the heel. They are blue. And when it's blue, the TYR logo kind of stands out a little more, which is kind of curious to me. And I'm wondering why TYR didn't send out samples of that colorway just because the logo stands out a little more. But with that said, I'm not complaining. I think this is probably one of the sharpest looking shoes that I have. It's so clean. And I gotta tell you that in my testing period, there have been rainy days that I chose not to take out this shoe just because I wanted to keep it clean. And with that, I've already given it away. I didn't run in this shoe in the wet because I didn't want to get it dirty, so I haven't tested it in wet conditions, although I had absolutely zero problems running in the dry. There was plenty of grip, and it was a very stable platform. Now remember, we've got 39 in the heel. That's quite a big stack, and yet I never felt wobbly, which tells me that the Valkyrie Speedworks is overall a very stable shoe. Now, there are no stability elements in it other than the inherent stability that comes from when we put a rigid plate inside a shoe, but other than that, the Speedworks is totally neutral. Now, the Valkyrie Speedworks is an up-tempo shoe, right? It's got the plate, it's got the PEBA foam, you know it's made to go fast, and it feels good when it's going fast. But what I was surprised at is how good it feels when it's going slow. And in this way, it kind of reminded me of the Endorphin Speed 4, in that it's a plated daily trainer, which I think is more skewed to the faster end of the spectrum. But if you did want to run in this shoe day in and day out, I don't think you'd run into any problems. It's definitely comfortable, and it feels good at slower paces as well as faster paces. Now, when we do get up to faster paces, I think that's when you start to notice this PEBA foam. It's soft, it responds well, and then we've got that plate just giving it that extra rigidity. It's a fun shoe to pick up the pace in. And I have done my easy runs, and I have done tempo runs, and I did take this out to do intervals. And you know, it works well in all situations. Now, a possible reason that this shoe works well in all situations and feel good going fast is that, you know, it's fairly rigid, but I'm not having too much trouble bending it. So that nylon plate isn't totally rigid, which we know a nylon plate is not going to be as rigid as a carbon fiber plate, but I've certainly had more rigid nylon shoes than this. And I think it gives it a very natural feeling when you're out on the run. I'm gonna say my favorite thing about this shoe was the midfoot lockdown. I think this upper and the gussets on the tongue just wrap around my foot and make it feel very secure. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I really love the ride. That I think is why you would buy this shoe. The ride is phenomenal. But what was noticeable to me was this midfoot lockdown. I just really liked how it made my foot feel a part of the shoe. The only gripe I have is right here at the back. When I wore very low socks when I was running in it, and the back of the sock dropped down just a little bit, I did get a little irritation from the back on the back of my heel, but I only started noticing that at the end of a run, and I was running about an hour that day. And then after that, I made sure to wear socks that were just a little bit higher, and it wasn't noticeable again. I mean, it wasn't really bad, but it was something that I noticed, and I made a mental note to tell you about it. I gotta tell you, I'm pretty impressed with the Valkyrie Speedworks. Now, I haven't run too much in it. Obviously, I've run over 50K. That's my benchmark before I do a review, but I did have the crazy thought that perhaps the Valkyrie Speedworks is on the list for my shoe of the year. That's how much I enjoyed every single run in this shoe. So I'd love to hear from you. What is your up-tempo kind of nylon plated shoe of choice? There are a lot of options out there. And would you consider buying the TYR Valkyrie Speedworks? Now, TYR has had a pretty good year so far. When I'm making this video, it's only April 2024, and TYR has come out with 2 epic shoes. And I'll make sure I put a link in the show notes of the Valkyrie Elite Carbon in case you're interested in the race day option. But for now, it's Matt B. This has been my review of the TYR Valkyrie Speedworks. Be kind, be happy, run well. I'll see you in a couple of days.